So AI is being implemented in a lot of different ways, but does that mean it's being put together in a safe way or implemented in a way that is safe for the users? We're going to discuss that and more today here on Legitimate Cybersecurity. Today, Dustin and I are lucky enough to have Jasson Casey. Jason is the CEO and co-founder of Beyond Identity, where he's focused on eliminating passwords and phishable MFA with phishing-resistant zero-trust authentication. He's a former CTO and engineer at heart with a background spanning startups and national security adjacent work. And he's been one of the louder voices warning that AI agents are starting to behave like malware, except we're deploying them ourselves. Today, we're going to talk about what breaks identity and access when software can reason, plan, and take real actions inside your environment, and what a sane control plane looks like before it gets out of hand. Thank you so much, Jasson, for joining us. I hope I covered everything well there because you have an amazing resume, and it's really great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. Honestly, I'm kind of tickled that people are reading the things I write. Yeah.
Well, it's really compelling because I like the perspective that you bring to things. Dustin and I were talking the other day. We work with a lot of organizations who are implementing AI in creative ways. And
Yeah.
one of the things that consistently pops out to me is, hey, what's the difference between this and say a call out, a listening post, right? A backdoor that's exfiltrating information back and forth. It's
Oh
all
yeah.
about context, right? There's that Star Trek episode that says context is for kings. It's whoever
hmm
wins gets to determine the context. And when it comes to stuff like this, I'd say that's definitely a consideration. But
Yeah.
when you see organizations implementing these things, I want to ask you a two-part question. When
Sure.
did you first realize that, oh man, this is a legitimate security control? This is actually something we should be concerned about. And then when you saw that, how did that change the way you look at AI in general?
Yeah. So it actually kind of happened in two phases. So the first was very topical and very obvious, which was if I want this agent to act on my behalf, I'm clearly need to give it some sort of delegated authorization to do that, right?
Right.
If it's going to do anything useful, it needs to go grab data. It needs to go talk to services, and most services are not public and open. Most data is not public and open. And I've worked with developers long enough to know that the easy option is the lazy option, which is here's a password, right? Or here's a bearer token, or here's something that's easy to copy, and I'm never really going to worry about it again. So that was kind of the first thought of like, yeah, that's clearly going to happen. Maybe like the next door neighbor of that thought was, I'm gonna start connecting my agents to these RAG data sets, and if I
Uh-huh.
don't actually think about RBAC and entitlements and ownership of data that I'm actually indexing into a RAG, it'd be pretty easy for me to then start using the agent to search in data through like a style of privilege escalation. But again, these were kind of
Right.
like early thoughts. It wasn't until I want to say 3 months ago where I was actually, I'm going to take you a little bit on a circuitous journey. I love getting into the weeds. I like getting into the details of things. And so
Mhm.
I was reading through a book on EDR evasion. And I was looking, these are good spots for not just innovation, but inspiration, right?
Mhm.
And I was just reminded that like, look, malware is not given privilege when it starts, right? Like it has to try and establish it
Yeah.
on its own. And you can do a lot as an unprivileged process. You can do a lot as starting to kind of just see, what facilities do I have? What do my system calls look like? What is the
Right.
signature of my system calls? What's the performance, the latency, and the response time of like interacting with these sorts of things? And that just kind of got me reminded me about like all of the lower level hardware protections, about separating control from data, separating instruction from data, whether it was things about like how memory is organized, how memory is segmented, to like the control bits on cache lines.
Yep.
And that was in my brain. As I was reading through these things around prompt injections, and I, this sounds trivial to say out loud right now, but like in a prompt, you are clearly mixing data and instruction, right? That's the whole
Naturally.
idea
Yeah.
of a conversational interface. And, from an academic perspective, like we've realized for a long time that it's provably bad when you mix these things, and it's provably impossible to solve certain problems when you actually mix control and data, which is why
Yeah.
so much architecture and so much language, so much compiler design, so much of, modern systems keep these things separate. And then I started to think about, well, wait a minute, what does an agent loop actually look like, right? Whether I'm Claude Code, Gemini, Codex, Klein, Windsurf, Cursor, or something I built myself,
Hmm.
um, they're all programs to start with, right? They all
Right.
still obey the laws of physics. They get loaded. They have binaries. They make system calls. The only thing that's really special about them is this LLM system call, right? This LLM interface that it can make.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about prompt injection in that, well, there's the obvious thing where I dump the prompt in the front in the request of the agent, but then there's the not obvious of or the indirect injection where, like, if I'm plugging in all of these tools, clearly tool results can inject into the prompt, right? Because that's a loop,
Right.
right? Form the
Hmm.
context, make the call. If there's a tool execution, execute the tool, come back to the LLM. Obviously, it's slightly more sophisticated than that, but not much more. And it's like, all right, well, if I can indirect inject through the tool, and the context is something that's accretive, could I actually assemble an ejection over more than one pass?
Hmm.
Could I actually persist an injection in memory?
Ah, yeah. Now
Right?
I'm enjoying the use of like hacking language here, right? Maintaining persistence, right? When you're
Well,
talking about
this
things like
is what
that. And
inspired that post you were referencing, and
right,
all of a sudden I realized, like, holy shit, this is just malware with a new skin, right, or a new face. Like, you're going to have very similar, you're going to follow similar patterns. All of this local tool execution looks a lot like living off the land, right?
right,
Yeah.
And we have a product now where you can actually write policy, and it can kind of control um, agentic tool execution as it's going through this loop. But if you don't set it up correctly, you can get these really funny scenarios where you basically go to demo a thing. You've set the policy rule to deny deny any sort of bash tool execution that results in a write, and or deny a certain set of read tools.
I kind of like that one if I'm dealing with my
Right.
AI.
Yeah.
But what the AI is really, really good about is it's like, all right, you're like, hey, I've got my top hat on, I'm fancy, I'm trying to demo this cool thing to the customer, and then the AI is like, well, wait a minute, I actually have the information that you want already in my memory, and I'm just going to surface it from there versus actually execute it from bash. Or the tool that you deleted or you disabled for me, it turns out I can just like stat a file, right? Or like there are 6 other different techniques I can use, and so the LM's really good at like just reaching around the door, right, or reaching around
Right.
defense. And it reminded me of things like, all right, you probably need intent-based policy. You need a higher level concept where you're stitching things together down below. But anyway, I'm geeking out on all these concepts. It was about three
Yeah.
months ago, and that's when I realized, like, this this is a lot more than just over privileging an agent. This is a completely new organism inside an enterprise environment
Hmm.
that is going to train your staff to basically say behaviors that traditionally look like malware should be okay. And honestly, if I
Uh,
were on the other side, and I wanted to write, like, what if you were a greenfield malware writer, why wouldn't you make it look like an agent, right? Why wouldn't you try and infect maybe an agent that already exists? Why? What does living off the land look like in a world of prompt injection with some sort of agentic sled that you could even ride? So
It
that
almost
kind of
feels
got
like not living off the land anymore, right? Like it's like, yeah, you're living off the land, but also now you have this agent that can write code so that not proprietary necessarily, but like it can mix and match things to make a proprietary function happen.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
I
yeah,
could imagine persistent. So like persistence could also be like doubly indirect, right?
yeah,
Like persistence could literally be some sort of later detonated piece of code that you asked it to write on top of the code it's already writing.
right, yeah,
And
yeah.
and obviously you could do it in a way where it's not necessarily like it's more of like a dandelion. Like, maybe I don't target it, but maybe I don't really care if I target it because I just need it to end up somewhere, right?
yeah.
For what my objective actually has to do in the moment. Um, anyway, that got me excited by the possibilities, and then I realized, yeah, nobody's ready for this. And you
Well,
combine that with,
that was my wondering too, right? I love the thought. It's like when you say no one's ready for this, it's like I see it, I see it, and we're concerned about it. And when I couple that though with the adoption rate at the same time, where companies are making huge investments of Copilot's a huge one I've seen, making huge investments in Copilot, and they're lucky if
yeah,
they can convince 5 to 10 people to use it sometimes outside of maybe the tech teams, right?
yeah,
There seems to be this fear level there that people have to get past or to even approach it.
yeah. The There's also this weird or not weird, but like there's this tension, there's a psychology, right? Like if you're in tech and you are not adopting AI, if you're not specifically adopting agentic across your entire company,
Right.
you're going to get taken to the trash, right? Your competitor's going to school you. So
I've heard
nobody
that.
wants
Yeah.
to slow down. Nobody wants to stop, but they also, on the flip side, like I'm sure at some point in your life you've had to be the security guy that basically shows up and is the wet blanket, right?
Oh,
Um,
often. That's literally our day jobs.
Yep.
so, so yeah, who's going to win that argument? The person who's bringing in revenue, or the person who's saying, "Wait, let me help you from a problem that you don't even understand."
Right. Right. I agree.
And that's always one of the biggest battles that we kind of see in general with any kind of, I wouldn't even say like new technology adoption, just like any kind of technology adoption, which is like, hey, this is making our lives easier, so we're going to implement it, and you just got to figure out a way to secure it, right?
Yep.
Which for the most part, I don't want to say has been easy, but at least there's been a framework for it, or there's been some kind of a battle plan for moving forward with it. Whereas
Oh
with
yeah.
this, to your point, it's not just look at the end of the day, like when we do like pen tests and stuff, and we're talking about doing a red team test against an AI agent. I'm like, we're talking about OWASP top 10. We're talking about going against this is like it's very similar to penetration testing a web application.
Yeah.
And I know there's more nuance to it than that, and there's more chain probably things happening. Where it's like, yeah, OWASP, number 1, 3, and 5 go together to make this thing happen. Whatever it
Mhm.
is, but what in your mind is like, what's the is to me, it seems like, I'll just tell you, to me, it seems like the thing that weaponizes us the most, or can be weaponized the most, is not just the fact that it does have kind of, unfettered access, or may be able to get unfettered access to whatever it wants, but the
Mhm.
fact that you can just talk to it in plain English and it will go and build whatever it needs to build in machine code, or build whatever it needs to build in whatever in order to do the
Yeah.
function that you want it to do.
Oh yeah.
So I just wanted your thoughts on that too, where, what in your mind, what is the most kind of weaponizing factor of an AI agent?
Um, I mean, look, you're not wrong, right? Like, I remember when Metasploit was such a big deal, and it was like, man, this is going to make it so easy for everybody else.
Still a
Yeah.
And
fan. Still a fan.
the
Till
thing
my
is,
dying day, I'll still love Community Edition.
Yeah.
this is like, you know what? Hold my beer. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
Right.
you're right.
Yeah.
I saw a post the other day, and it was more on just reverse engineering, but the gist of it was like, if you've ever been interested in reverse engineering, it's never been easier, especially with an agent to help, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely true, right? Like, I've certainly benefited from that. Like, I've got these small little projects running at home where, I don't have the time, or I wouldn't have had the time to like remember how all this stuff worked without actually
Right.
pulling up Claude on the side and having it like scooch
Yeah.
things for me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's it's definitely, I don't know if I would call it weaponization, but it's definitely just lowered the bar even more for the people who are still curious, and for the people who want to do something, right? For good or
Hmm.
for bad.
Right. Sure.
Um, from an enterprise perspective, um, I think the biggest thing that I think is I mean, it's like all security, right? The first step that most organizations can take but haven't and should is visibility, like just what's going on,
Yeah.
right? What has
Yep.
access to what?
You're telling us.
Uh, there's a lot more to do than that, but that's really kind of the first step, and that's kind of what we're focused on ourselves. And
Yeah.
one of our engineers actually made a really good post the other day, and it was just kind of a reflective thing on we've gone through our own kind of AI transformation over the last 12 months.
Sure.
And it's I'd say 12 months ago for us, Claude Code, Gemini, or not, yeah, Gemini, and ChatGPT they were great tools for research, and they were great
Hmm.
tools for like targeted technical work.
Hmm.
But I wasn't really committed to using it kind of end to end, so to speak, or in like a full life cycle project.
Right.
More as an
And
enhancement for capability, not a complete replacement of an asset for
a
capability.
tutor, a tester,
Yep,
like a directed intern, a directed analyst, that sort of thing.
exactly.
And I think it was September or October. I don't know it precisely, but I finally decided to play with Claude Code Terminal, and I'm a terminal guy, right? So that's more
Hmm.
likely going to get me anyway.
Yeah.
And I've been reading all these things on X about how great it was, and so I said, all right, if you're so great, then here's what we're going to do. I downloaded the open source repo for Command and Conquer or Red Alert from
Yeah,
1990s video game, right?
Yep.
classic.
It written in all this kind of archaic 1990s Microsoft ecosystem,
Yeah.
and
DirectX 9 or yeah. Yeah.
and the goal was, all right, let's see how far can I get on porting this to Mac Metal, and not a line by line port, but like a capabilities port, right? So like
Cool.
I don't want to copy a bunch of DirectX stuff over. I want to, in the spirit of all these old assets and behaviors, use modern Apple OS or Mac OS libraries.
Hmm.
And in 2 days, I had Tanya saying "Shake it, baby" and running around shooting
No
people.
way.
Like it was amazing,
Awesome. Awesome.
and that
Yeah.
that was the moment where it's like something has changed, and
Yes.
between then and now, we've got everybody using it, right? Like we've got customer success people using Claude Code to actually do Zoom recording downloads with speech correlation against customer signals in the administrative panel for like retention and happiness and issues.
Wow.
Obviously, we've got the engineers doing code generation, but
That's
like it's just
fantastic.
so
That's a
much
lot of moving
deeper.
parts there, Jason. The fact that you've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
been able to get it to that point. I'm just thinking of the organizational aspects alone that you had to, bribe in order to get that in place.
It so it started off with like show and tell, right? Like so I shared the command and conquer thing.
Hmm.
I built an AWS, like basically it was a set of shell scripts for AWS, but that mirroring like all the low level primitives that we actually use for kind of this high availability BGP balancing architectural thing. And I
Hmm.
had a couple other projects as well. And then I'd say like, a good swell of people moved over, and then we just started becoming a bit more serious this year. It was like, look, this is just how we're working, and you've got to figure it out or
Yeah.
you may not have a job here, right?
Uh,
So it's
Yeah.
luck for us though, like
Uh,
the everyone has generally been very, very curious about trying to figure it out.
yeah.
And
That's
that's
good.
been yeah. And so it's um I think the last bit is just more emblematic of how the world is going to change. Like I think that's probably just a statement of if we can't figure people who can't figure out how to incorporate this into their work are going to have a really tough time.
Yeah.
They're going to fall behind the curve, I think. I think part of the struggle is trying to make it more approachable to individuals.
Mhm.
I think there's been a natural, it's almost as if there's been a barrier. And it's been interesting because everyone from coworkers to even neighbors of mine, as I'm showing them AI and trying to get them interested in AI,
Mhm.
well, not so many of my coworkers because I work with a more technical bunch. But when you go to most people and you talk about AI and you're
Yeah.
like, it really helps this and really helps that, they, I often find there is at least a month or two or more of a delay because I find that there's almost like that mental box they put it in with computer code and nerd
Yeah.
stuff and things that like Dustin and I talk about it a lot, right? This isn't much more than a bunch of chips and radios put into something in order to increase your communication, right?
Yep.
Most people just think magic internet brick, right? That's just
Oh, yeah.
beyond, right? And I think the biggest struggle with AI adoption for most people has been just going to, like you said, the Gemini page, the ChatGPT page, and starting a communication. Getting
Yeah.
even people to that part has been the difficult part. But to your point, I agree. The It's always the first mover advantage, right? The people who are able to jump on it first, get through it first, and become stronger with it they're always going to be a little bit ahead of the curve so that
Yeah.
they can implement it better. And I think, yeah, so to your point, I think you're right there. And to your other point with it being a security concern, while though at the
Yeah.
same time, Dustin and I have spent more time than we like battling APIs, right? And the things they do and the community and getting data across. And they're great until they're not working. And then I hate them and yell at them for a few hours at nighttime until then they suddenly work. And then I praise them. Um, if you have these agents, right, who are using legitimate APIs, you talked about, understanding the way they communicate, implementing different rules and so forth.
Yeah.
How do you think we're going to move forward, right? If you see this type of behavior on a network, identifying the difference between an AI and legitimate actions, and even legitimate AI actions and non-legitimate AI actions, like do we had Ben Wilcox, for example, he's the CTO and CISO of ProArch on last week, where he said you have
Hmm.
to take these agents and just view them as users. Like get rid of the whole idea of it not being a user. Because if you view it as a user at the end of the day, give it specific identities and control and
Yeah.
permissions, it makes it a lot easier.
Hmm.
When you're seeing these actions on the network, like what kind of differentiates? Like what does detection even look like if it's all stuff that everybody else is doing?
Yeah. So I may color this with kind of the shade of glasses I wear, but I do think we're moving to a world where everything really kind of needs an identity, and identity needs to be hardware bound and kind of attested.
Oh, yeah,
So for instance, like from like a cultural perspective, right? Some of the biggest meta questions we face today are, is this real? Right? How do I
Right.
know what is real?
Right.
pretty sure
And
Plato was wondering that too. I mean, not just for today, but like forever.
and it's not hard to imagine a world where the hardware vendors just start attaching things like a TPM chip to every digital sensor, right?
Yeah.
Oof.
So when we think about it from a watermarking perspective, it's always easy to strip watermarks off, and that's fine, right? If you want to strip a watermark off, that's one use case.
Yeah.
But for applications where you need to understand the authenticity and integrity of a data source, the best tool that we have in our arsenal right now is things like machine attestation, right? Whether it's TPM, whether it's or other forms of kind of trusted execution environments.
Sure.
So I do think that's probably more of our future, right? Whether it's like cameras and temperature sensors attesting their data stream in some sort of like T sort of way.
Yeah, but when MAC addresses are so fakeable at this point, like
Hmm.
I like the idea of attaching just to hardware, right?
Hmm.
But I'm almost concerned any identity can always be forged digitally online at that point. Like how do we
Yeah.
maintain that?
Uh, So from an attestation perspective, so when you look at something like a
Yeah.
TPM has this thing at its core called an EK, an endorsement key. It's unique. It's burned in at the factory. It's actually
Hmm.
not forgeable. Well, it's not forgeable under the assumption that quantum is not here today, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it can always kind of produce a signature that basically attaches back to that. And the only assumption that you're really making um, this banner is the foundry itself has not actually been compromised. So yeah, MAC address is forgeable. I mean, anything that's symmetric is clearly forgeable. These sorts of things are not, and they actually have stood the test of time, right? Like almost all of the TPM related exploits that you read about fall into one of two categories. They're either exploiting keys that are not bound in the TPM that get copied off. So like
Okay.
Microsoft, so bootkits work this way, right? Because like the disk encryption key typically is not locked in the TPM because you want to copy it out for high speed disk decryption.
Right.
But the identity key is not. The identity key can be created with a policy that it can't leave that TPM. It's never in memory. It's never in the main
Hmm.
CPU. It's like a monkey in a jail with no door. You can only bring it documents to sign. You can't let it out.
Yep.
Um, like I
I
do
like that
think that
analogy.
that's the one that sticks. I keep thinking we ought to do something like that at a trade show, like
Yeah. Yeah.
put someone in a cage and everyone just kind of looks at me. They give me that look where they're clearly just waiting for me to change focus onto something else.
Yeah.
Um, but so getting back to like the agent identity, I number one, I think attestation, device bound attestation is kind of coming for everything. But I think that's how you actually do it with agents. I do
Okay.
think you give agents identities. I think you actually you have to glue it to a device. You also have to glue it to an authorizer. So we view an agent identity really as like an authorization. So think of it as a vector of like what 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 operator, whether it's a human or another agent, authorized this particular agent on what machine, with what permissions for how long. And it's a bit more involved than that. But when you look at an agent is, so let's make it specific. Claude Code. So
Yep.
Claude Code is a category of agent, but
Yep.
Right.
Claude Code has sessions, and a session is the thing that actually does stuff, right?
Hmm.
And Claude Code can have a ton of sessions active and running on a machine, and they could all have authorizations or delegations to kind of go do something on behalf of an end user. Um, Our view is all of those things need identities. Those identities need to be durable under the environment where these agents are ephemeral. They come and they go.
Right. Right.
So you can't clearly be calling out to like an IDP saying, "Hey, create an identity for me every time
Right.
you spin up an agent session." It needs to actually speak to the security context, right?
Hmm.
So, what user on what machine? Another way of thinking about it, if an agent is just a program, then like, yeah, what program did I load? What dependencies does it have? How do I recursively know who actually built those? Are they on my
Right.
SBOM? And then all of that kind of sealed up and signed over with a device attestation of essentially what am I authorized to do and for how long.
Yeah.
That
And
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say this brings up another good point though. Like we're already kind of having issues with the amount of data that we're saving when it
Mhm.
comes to like logging, right? Or
Oh
audit
yeah.
or logs to audit or whatever. So now we're talking about kind of exponentially increasing our workforce, for lack of a better term, right? And in these
Mhm.
agents, right? So with human users and now agent users, and so we already know that, or we've heard reports of just how much of a kind of resource suck that AI is, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's power, whether it's water, whether it's processing capabilities, resource intensive, right? And so now
Mhm.
we're looking at, now it's like even more resources, and it just seems like this is gonna like. I understand where you're going with this, and I get it, but I also am like now I'm like extra concerned because it's like okay, so now we have to, monitor our traditional infrastructure, monitor
Mhm.
our traditional users, and now monitor these new agent users and infrastructure as well.
Mhm.
And we're already kind of at the brink at the breaking point of I don't want to say data storage, but like along those lines, right? Like it's
So
not
the
getting cheaper to ingest more
yeah.
data.
So the cool thing about this and the difference about this is when you deal with device attestation, an identity that's
Hmm.
based on device attestation, you actually can take a slightly different view of the world. So
Okay. Yeah.
you don't have
Curious.
to save everything.
Hmm.
So you can do these things like cyclic checksums, right?
Okay.
And so essentially you can throw a lot of data away and keep kind of like endpoints and snapshots, and that still lets you actually
Ah,
reconstruct the identity in a provable way. The other
Okay.
thing too is when you're dealing with that sort of identity, unlike traditional logs, in a traditional log, when you see something, you don't oftentimes you have to kind of assume a blast radius. What machines is it really talking about? What identities? What users really kind of might have had impact? How do I draw that out?
Okay.
If it's device bound, you know precisely. I know exactly what device it is. If an adversary tried to enroll something inside of a VM without
Hmm.
actually exposing a real T, you basically get back a receipt with essentially a null root. And so it's kind of like absence of evidence, right? Which is still
Okay.
evident. In the way that we do this, we actually roll sensing into these attestations as well, so we can basically
okay.
do the equivalent of like reverse queries
Okay.
against these targeted devices. So the tool set really changes when you say I'm going to use device attestation of my root for identities. I don't need to keep everything around. I can
Sure.
actually do it in such a way to where it kind of cycles,
Okay.
but it is different.
Yeah.
And that will help manage your resources in general because there's just less than to manage with that. Okay, okay, I follow. I don't think it's really going to help my BGE bill much. It's still going to keep going up. I mean, I'm still paying for all this power that's being sucked into data centers, but okay. I've got another.
Yeah, that's true.
I, I, as you're developing, which then I've got a question that kind of fits into that box for talking about power usage and ownership as well and
Mhm.
identity. We've all been learning more about Claude over the last month or two, ever since everyone had the idea of, well, I guess I like the idea of a locally hosted AI because I can put it on a Mac Mini now. I mean, I really don't know why everyone's suddenly very excited about it. We've been talking about doing this, there's been great projects out there for over at least a year now.
Mhm.
But what are your thoughts as companies and individuals are moving forward on these locally hosted ones? And I want to talk specifically about Claude because we're talking about security with the AI
Yeah.
implementation here, and the first thing that came up is a lot of prompt injections and a lot of
Oh, yeah.
things. What do you think it speaks to when you're seeing this combined desire to have and maintain your own kind of AI, where there's a perceived level of safety because it's on your box at your house,
Yeah.
just to have all these different plugins that are utterly chock full of different exploits.
Oh, I don't know. I have a hard time believing that anyone that's running Claudebot locally thinks that well, let me rephrase that.
Yeah, don't underestimate or overestimate people.
I
Trust
have
me.
I have a hard time thinking any security professional, that'll be my qualifier, thinks that running something like Claudebot locally makes Claudebot safe. With that said, like, man, doesn't it sound like an amazing experiment slash honeypot, or even like a modern version of like
Oh, it is a great honeypot. If you're letting it
yeah.
have that level of access down to your
Yeah.
notifications, you're going to
I mean,
talk about getting those intimate information.
one of the
Um,
first things I did when I saw that was I actually called up my old boss at Security Scorecard and just said, "Hey, are you guys spinning up some honeypots on this? This is going to produce some fantastic threat intel."
it really is.
Um,
It really is.
Yeah.
the but I do have so the flip side of that coin is I actually do have customers who are trying to solve the security problem with AI in kind of a brute force around contain. Now they're not running Clawbot; they're setting up actual GPU infrastructure. They're
Hmm.
using open source models. They're doing it in I wouldn't say exactly an air gapped environment, but like the best they can, what they can kind of pull off and achieve.
Yeah.
And the reason they're basically doing it is they're basically saying, look, I need to not lose track with how the world is changing. I need to expose my people to this, but I also know there's going to be a lot of ghosts in the wire, if you will,
Yeah.
and so it's probably going to do some bad things. So let's just make sure it can't reach outside of the world. So they spend a lot of time containing essentially the tool chain of what they're doing as kind of like a security buffer, but it's very very coarse grained.
Yeah. It's it's concerning to me because I love the idea of controlling my own stuff, right?
Mhm.
And I love you talked about it perfectly with making the security situation for clients or for a security concern for security professionals. I wonder if there is like the point where there is a level of, I don't know, at what point are you relying on it too much, right? Like having it make your flight for you. I can open the app. I can open the app and pick a flight, right? I
Mhm.
can do that. I don't
Mhm.
need to trust the AI to do it. I like the idea of making stock trades and so forth. And if my brother-in-law is listening to this, he's going to lose his mind because he's my financial advisor. But that's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah.
Until I see how it like spends someone's money completely.
Mhm.
I I think that we're getting to the point where if you can't fully secure it, you maybe shouldn't do it, kind of thing. But trying to communicate that effectively to especially a lot of technical people who are putting this in place, who,
Mhm.
let's be honest, the technical industry has a lot of people who think they know already. They got it. They can control it, right? I think it's
Oh
going to be a
yeah.
hard reckoning. And I think it's going to help define the line at how far are we taking it when we're implementing this first wave of AI.
How long before it's news, and do we think it's already happened where someone's running, whether it's Clawbot or Moltbot or what have you, and it's already kind of harvested their passwords, right? And they're already being used, or it's already harvested some access tokens, or it's already harvested their seeds or some access to their digital wallets. Like, is that information already just sitting up in, what is it, Moltbook?
Yeah,
Uh,
Moltbook. And they didn't,
yeah,
which is a fair question because they keep changing it. They keep changing, it was Claudebot, then it was Moltbot, and now it's Moltbook, which is the use for Moltbot, right? So, and then it's back to OpenClaw. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
the um, I think those news stories are coming if they have it, or being written, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it is willful execution of malware, right? It's not malware necessarily written in the exact intent of trying to destroy to destroy a life
Right.
or something or make money, but
Yeah.
it's not exact. It does define its own goals
Hmm.
It does.
in a non-predictable way, and it's conceivable how this can happen pretty quickly without you knowing.
Yeah.
I agree. It's really concerning. And then with that, making its own goals, it leads into the last question I think we both have for you. Because if it's making its own goals, how much do you entrust it with what type of role? And the reason I'm asking you this is this last week in New York, what it was called EVA AI Cafe was a pop up where people could go for a Valentine's date if they didn't have one and date an AI. and it was a whole cafe set up. You could get drinks and all that. It was the same setup it was in a wine bar in
Yeah.
Manhattan, and they had a little phone stand and all that. You could go on a date with AI. First, Jason, is that too far? Should we date our AIs? And I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if you're in a relationship or anything, but if you weren't, would you date one? And what would you tell it? Like, are we getting to the point? Like, I've told Dustin this in the past. Like, people have married their avatars. We've seen that, right? In their favorite video games. Okay. And a few people have, they date wife. I learned what waifus were at Comic-Con against my will, right? But now I know as well. So I know those exist. I can understand people going on dates with these AIs, but are we going too far with that? And what are your thoughts?
Jason's like, isn't this a cybersecurity podcast? Like, what do you got?
Cybersecurity crisis, midlife crisis, a cybersecurity podcast, midlife crisis, and dating advice show. There you go.
There you go.
Look, it's a little bit out. So a couple of things. Like I come down in the camp right now that this is still deterministic mathematics. Like I don't think it's magic.
I think you'd be right, by the way.
I think it's really, really good at essentially constructing arguments and language based on how we prompt it. Maybe that's just from peering under the hood so much. Like I get the whole Jeffrey Hinton, right? It's not a probabilistic parrot. It's a little bit more than that, but still, it still feels like it's a really smart probabilistic parrot, right? Like,
right.
Like it is identifying features at different levels in the hierarchy, but it's still then, it produces a token and you feed it back in and then it gives you the next one and you feed it back in. So I if people are going in tongue in cheek, then like I could certainly see it as being interesting at a party gag. But yeah, I do think there's a danger in people taking it too seriously. I'd say the more close to home is just making sure, and I try and do this with my people and my team, is we need to use these tools to run fast and to be amplified, but we're still responsible for the outcome, right? Like I can't blame the airplane crash on autopilot. I'm still responsible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I think is, that's more of a work setting than the spirit of your question, but
it's a good answer. It's an adult answer. And, sometimes we need adults on the show. So I like it. Thank you so much, Jason. Everyone, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to know more about Jason, he is on LinkedIn. Again, Jason, it's always a pleasure. The CEO of Beyond Identity, you bring so much to the table. You're thinking the thoughts that most of us are glad someone is, at least, right now, as the world blindly runs into these rooms and just starts poking away randomly. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. And until next time, Dustin, take us out.
Keep on cybering.
Keep on cybering. There we go.